Hello again, friends, and you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru, another soulful edition of this fine wrestling program. I am the great Brian Last, your host. I do this every time. I'll be asking your questions to the man who will be answering said questions, the very soulful star of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru, Mr. Warmth, the exalted one of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Yeah, blow it out your ass.
That's not very positive.
Well, I'm trying to stay positive. And by the way, we said, Heyman, for a while he was the voice of the homeless, we thought, and then I was the voice of the voiceless. Now, you and I both are the voices of the soulless. All the people that have no souls, that are soulless, unfeeling, unempathetic, cold, cruel, heartless, soulless zombies because we like pro wrestling instead of fucking football field fuckery. And so now we have become, according to Christopher Irvine, and so now we have become the voices, Brian Last, of the soulless, the last remaining people involved, I guess, in almost any way, shape, or form with the professional wrestling industry that still insist that it not piss us off when we watch it and be silly, but we're staying positive because we are those voices. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback, and I've been trying to stay positive, even though, as you know, I have undergone a variety of trials and tribulations, and it seems like just hours ago we did the experience this past week, maybe because it was.
Practically, yeah.
And then in between then and now, besides packing about 150 packages for the fine customers of the website that we're still not naming and the products that we're still not advertising because I still ain't out of the weeds, but if you've spent money with me in the last couple of weeks, there's a good chance your stuff is in the mail or going to be in the next 2 to 3 days as you hear this. So that's way better than we've been doing. And I appreciate the support. But anyway, in that brief period of time where I was trying to do that also, I had another one of those incidents that only happens now because the city of Louisville is starting to surround me. We've talked about this. I was out here minding my own business, and they found me. I didn't move. They expanded, right? And yesterday, here at the castle, guy's mowing my yard, and I'm trying to get these packages done, and he comes up, and from a safe distance, he says, well, one of your trees is leaning on your back fence. Ah, shit. Well, my back property line is, as longtime listeners of the program will know from many stories involved, used to be right up against this beautiful 140-acre farm for all these years and years. When I grew up here, that's where when I used to run away from home when I was a young little tyke and I'd get pissed off at my mom for making me do something, properly, and I'd decide to run away from home, what I would do is, because especially, well, no, really, especially back then, if you're fucking 8 years old, I'm not going to go 2 miles. And that was 4 houses, away. I couldn't just run away from home to the neighbors. If you're going to go somewhere, you got to go somewhere where nobody knows where you are. Right. And I didn't have the fucking leg power back then to get anywhere. So I would run away from home by going to the back of the property, in under all the trees. You can't see it from the house. It's nice and private. And I would look at the farm and I would talk to the cows. And I'd hang out with them. And I used to do this at the Rapides Parish Coliseum in Alexandria, Louisiana for Mid-South Wrestling. There was actually a cattle barn next to the wrestler parking and the locker room entrance and everything. And the cattle were there often. And I would talk to the cows and get them to talk back. Have you ever done that?
No.
You've never talked to the cows?
I've never spoken to the cows, no. Have you tipped the cow too?
No, that would be mean. But if you do that... That's
how you talk to the cow, or that's how they respond?
No, I'm telling you. If you do this a couple times, then they will start... And they'll get fooled because they're not bright beasts, okay? They're not Rhodes Scholars. That's why they end up on a bun. They've not organized yet. But if you do that a couple times, then they'll start talking back to you. And I could bake the whole barn in Alexandria, or I'd have the whole and then of course when they start talking to each other, and you can get a racket going. And that was fun when I was 8 years old, running away from home and still on the property back in the woods. Anyway, I digress. So the point is, I hadn't been back there in a couple months because I've had shit to do, and I eyeball it, but you can't see everything. And I'm also, since now over the past 10 years or so, that farm is now a subdivision. And I believe I've mentioned for longtime listeners, one guy decided to build his house underneath my oak tree back there and got mad when a limb fell. Anyway, so I'm worried because I don't know so I go back there, right? I walk back. And there's an area about 100 feet long where a bunch of the little trees that were saplings when I was, a sapling myself are now, unlike me, 40, 50, 60-foot fucking maples and sycamores and chestnut to poplar. Who knows what the fuck all these trees are. And because there are a lot of them in a tight area, it's very cool, actually, when you look at it, because this is where I used to play Tarzan also, because there's some fucking vines back there, those big vines that grow as big around as your fucking forearm, and you can swing off of them and everything. Anyway, so they've all grown in different directions because they were looking for the sunlight. And so there's some cool trees. One of them's actually growing. It's big around as me now at a 45-degree angle, but it grows that way naturally. Very picturesque. But one of these fucking things, in the high winds that we've had lately in the thunderstorms, has cracked off at the base. Not all the way, but it's cracked, and instead of growing at a 75-degree angle, it's now at about a 40-degree angle, and what stopped it was my solid wood 8-foot-tall privacy fence that I had built when they started that goddamn subdivision, just to tell them I didn't want to look at their fucking headlights, and I didn't want to hear their goddamn family arguments, and I didn't want to see their fucking happy children playing fucking hopscotch on the goddamn street. I wanted to see my cows, or by God, I was going to block it off. But anyway, it's wedged there now, so the trunk is cracked, but not all the way, and it's wedged on top of that fence in just such a fortuitous manner that it did not topple over the fence like a goddamn ladder match spot and go straight through the roof of this fucking guy's house behind me. It cost $350,000, but he's got a backyard 15 feet wide. So I'm, fuck, right? Where's Joe LeDuc? I need a lumberjack. Where's Andre? I'm Edward Carpentier. I've got a tree in my path. Where is Andre when you need him, right? So anyway, my yard guy, he's pretty good with anything about as big around as your leg or no more than 12 feet in the air. But this calls for a specialist, because now I'm looking at this thing. Imagine this. There's this giant solid wood fence that a fucking tree as big around as my waist is leaning on top of and is sticking up another 40 fucking feet directly over this other house. And it's directly in the middle of the house. So it's right in the middle of the backyard. And there's no way that you can climb anything around it because now it's open air. So there's no way to get up there to take it down in pieces. How the fuck is this going to take place? So I got to call my tree guy. My tree guy's name is Corky. And he's an excellent tree guy, as you would expect from a guy named Corky. And he comes over and he looks at it and he says, well, we need a crane. I said, well, how the fuck are we going to get a crane back here? He said, oh, no, I can't bring it back here. I've got to go through their side. I'm like, oh, fuck. So this is a goddamn day's adventure. I have to send my agent Corky around because you can't get through there. Obviously, I'm landlocked in the back. All the people that were originally here have property next to me that you can't get into this subdivision. So Corky has to drive down to the corner and turn left, go around, jump around, pick a bale of cotton, and go to these people who luckily are out in their yard because it's a nice day and they're social distancing and their little postage stamp properties. And so somehow he arranges that they're going to go through that side with a crane that's going to fucking somehow take this tree out of there. So then he comes back around and he tells me, now I got to get my crane guys on standby. Well, do you have a crane guy on standby, Brian?
I don't.
Well, you should. You should always have one because things like this pop up. He says, I'll get it. So he gets him off a fucking ladder somewhere and gets him to take the log off his crane. That sounds like a goddamn blue pill spot. And he brings so this is an all-day thing. Now they bring the crane back into the subdivision. When I see this fucking crane, I'm shitting myself. This is a goddamn construction crane. The boom of this thing was literally 60 feet over the top of this 2-story subdivision house. And what they did apparently was the fucking guy who said, yeah, you can pull your crane up to help my neighbor out from not having the tree come through his roof. His wife sees this fucking crane, is like, that's going to blow up our driveway. And the crane guy's got to get a release signed from the fucking guy who's trying to help out. And his wife's pitching a fit over here. I'm on the other side of the fence. I don't know anything about this. But I see this fucking crane pull up, and then he hooked Corky up like they used to put me in a harness and raise me over the ring when they couldn't fly a cage from the roof of the arena. They would like put me in a harness and raise me up with one of these things, only like 15 times as high. He's literally, they put him in the street, hooked him up, picked him up over the goddamn house. He flew in a harness over this fucking house and into where this tree was, straps it up in 2 different places with these giant straps that are connected to the boom of this huge fucking crane that is taller than this goddamn house. And then they lower Corky back down, and he fucking jumps in his truck. And he drives out of the subdivision, back down to the corner, turns right, comes back up my driveway, runs from my driveway fucking 400 feet to the base of this tree. And he's on the walkie-talkie with the crane guy. I've been telling him, boom right, raise up, whatever the fuck they say. Now you say it, the crane guy's got the thing, he's got the tension on it, and Corky takes the fucking chainsaw to the bottom of this tree. And they give him a couple of fits and spurts, but finally he gets through it and the thing's loose, and now they're raising it up. As soon as Corky finishes cutting through it and the guy gets it raised up over the top of the fence, now this giant 40 to 50 foot tree that's as big around as my waist is hanging from this crane over this guy's 15-foot fucking backyard, and I'm shitting myself. I was shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds. Corky runs back another 400 fucking feet, whatever, to my goddamn driveway, hops and throws his chainsaw in the back, hops in the fucking truck, drives back down to the corner, turns left, goes into the subdivision, comes back around the front of this fucking house. And somehow by that point, my nerves were shot. And but they got that thing out from behind that house, over the house, is kind of over and to the side of the house, pulled it out in the middle of the street of this big thing and got it cut up, loaded up, and hauled off by dark. And that was a lot of my Saturday afternoon here at the castle grounds, was watching this. While they were blowing up downtown Louisville, but I was trying to throw trees through people's houses. Can you imagine? All I could think about was if that tree broke off and did the ladder match, the seesaw spot, and went through that guy's fucking house, then the worst thing that could possibly happen to me in the history of the world would be if he was a listener of the podcast. Because if that happened, if you were sitting in your own home and suddenly a tree fell through your fucking ceiling and cut your entire family in half, if you were a listener to this podcast, you would know in a heartbeat what to do. You would know in a second who to call. You would have the number on the tip of your tongue. You would have the name on the tip of your fingers, pointing to that keyboard to type in the proper information to contact the only man that could bring justice and order and compensation to your life after Cornette cut your family home in half with a tree. I'm talking about one man.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Skills to the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen P. New can indeed answer the age-old question. If a tree falls through your house and nobody's home, does anybody still hear it? The answer is yes. Whether the tree comes through your house when you're home or when you're gone, somebody's going to hear about it because Stephen P. New is going to take whoever owned that tree to court. And he can do the same thing to anybody. Whether large major corporation or little insignificant little mud show cretin, anybody that infringes or impinges on your rights, your properties, your freedoms, your justice, or poisons you in any sort of way with their haphazard products and shoddy substandard manufacturing, whatever it may be. If you've got to take somebody to court, you want somebody on your side that's going to win, not lose. I think that's fair to say. More of the good stuff, less of the bad stuff. With Stephen P. New, all you get is good stuff. And I cannot go into detail because it's ongoing litigation, but I have actually had the opportunity, I would say the pleasure, to witness Stephen P. New do that voodoo that he do so well in a court of law recently via video. And boy, howdy, I would tell, as a matter of fact, if Stephen was old enough to have been practicing when Nixon was in office, I believe he is the epitome of the attorney that, as Jerry Lawler used to say, could have talked Nixon out of Watergate.
I don't think he would have been on Nixon's side, though.
He wouldn't have been on Nixon's side, but if he'd have wanted to, he could have. That's exactly right. That the old Jerry. That, by the way, that is a line from the Ballad of Jerry Lawler. I could have talked Nixon out of Watergate. But anyway, there's going to be writing songs in the hills and hollers of West Virginia about the legends of Stephen P. New as he grows and grows. Because he was the one. He was the guy talking about asbestos and talcum powder. He was the guy talking about all these things that you read about in the news now. He was in the forefront of them, and he was getting people compensated for them long before they became fashionable. So if you need representation from a man whose name has cachet in the legal industry, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, Stephen P. New, the consigliere himself. Boy, he just bites the ass out of people. I mean, people leave the courtroom literally assless. You can see all the way to the front of their junk because their ass is gone after Stephen P. New finishes chewing on it.
Hey, Jim, to go back to the fence, I'm just curious. Well, the tree that hit the fence.
The tree the cat that chased the rat that lived in the house that Jim built.
I have a limit here where I live. I could only build a 6-foot fence. I could put like an unlimited high netting if I wanted to keep the deer out or, hit golf balls into the woods. But I could only build a 6-foot high fence. Do you have no limit? 8 feet?
No. 6 feet in the front, 8 in the rear. See, here in Kentucky, you can take a bigger one in the rear than you can in the front.
I guess so. Well,
hey, not only did I check on that with the fence company and all of the laws and regulations, but also I had them back it up to 1 foot behind my property line, just in case there was ever any fucking issue with the development company. And that way it's actually, I've ceded a foot to these people now. But if they wanted to piss at me about it, then I could. But I may, now that the people are actually living back there, instead of being an open mud hole, I may at some point try to be a good neighbor and put up something a little more attractive. But it saved their house.
Yeah. So, it ended up working out in the long run. If it had been a 6-foot fence, what would have happened?
Well,
would it have stopped it still?
Either it would have cracked farther and gone all the way over, or it would have stopped it and I would have been even fucking shittier or shakier about shitting. I would have been shakier and shitting myself. That's what I would have been doing. Even more.
Well, we don't want you to do that. And, of course, the theme of the drive-thru is we have listener questions.
I thought the theme of the drive-thru is, who are we going to piss off today? That's the question. Who are we going to insult, hurt their feelings, these soft namby-pamby? But because we're the voice of the soulless, and the soulless people love to see fucking people's namby-pamby feelings hurt. Here's the thing. Here's a question I have for you, Brian Last.
Oh, okay.
I have a question for you. Why is it that all the people who say wrestling is supposed to be silly and fun and make-believe and entertainment, and then you have no sense of humor, you hate fun, you have no soul, and then they're the ones that get mad and want to kill people when you make fun of their favorite wrestlers and don't take them seriously. They're the ones who don't think you should take the wrestling business seriously, but they take it very seriously when you make fun of their favorite wrestlers that don't take the business seriously. There is some type of paradox here. In the words of Bob Orton Jr., a paradox. You know what that is? It's not a place you park two boats, and it's not a couple of physicians.
A paradox.
I asked you a question in there somewhere.
Did you? I don't know what the question was.
Why do they get their panties in a wad? Isn't it all supposed to be fun? Aren't we supposed to take any of these people seriously? Well, that's exactly what we're doing here on this program. We're not taking anybody in the wrestling business seriously anymore because they don't take it seriously or themselves either. So we're just pointing out how fucking stupid and silly and goofy a lot of these people are. And then they just, they're so wounded. Oh, one of us needs some relief.
No, leave them alone.
You leave Brittany alone, and you leave Kenny alone. Grown men have pictures of other semi-grown men on their Twitter machines as their profiles, and or women. They have their favorite 40-year-old men have their favorite girl wrestler on their pictures, like they're 14-year-old girls with, and here comes fucking David Cassidy.
Well, that's what it is.
And to do Ron, motherfucker.
You think back 40 years or 45 years ago, even 30 years or 35 years ago, and wrestling's audiences were filled with old people and young people and different races, lots of women, and typically, even if they were in on it, even if they knew it was predetermined, they would lose themselves and root aggressively for their favorite good guy. Some people rooted for the bad guys, but mostly these people were rooting for the good guys. And let's just say a manager with glasses and a loaded tennis racket was causing trouble. They may want to stab him or perhaps do worse to him. Now, fast forward to today, those women are gone. Those old people are gone. The many different races, it's kind of closed down to be just one race in a lot of cases. And they still believe the same way. If you attack Kenny Omega with your tennis racket or the Young Bucks, they want to stab you. They want you to go away. They want to shut you down. We don't want to hear it, I think was the old chant Ole Anderson heard.
Well, you're going to have to hear it.
You get the same heat now that you did then. It's just that these are supposed to be the smart fans. If you really think about it.
Oh, God. Well, anyway, what are we doing here today?
Well, we have questions, lots and lots and lots of questions from the listeners of the Cult of Cornette. Before I get going, because sometimes you ambush me with this, do you have any questions from your end?
Well, I wasn't going to am your bush, but I did actually have one email that I wanted to bring to light because it's from Frank from Berlin. Come in, Berlin. I wanted to say that. No, hello, Mr. Cornette. Greetings from Germany. He's roughly 40. I'm going to paraphrase some of this. Roughly 40 years old, and he's been watching wrestling since he was like 11 or 12. He had some questions. Basically to do with championship belts and the way that they're dealt with. He says, I imagine there were and are differences between smaller and bigger companies, but basically it was this. Who would be responsible for the belts, their transportation and their condition, the champions or the office? What would happen if a belt was forgotten at home or at the office, lost or stolen or irreparably damaged? Who would have to pay for a new belt and what were the costs? How many manufacturers of belts were recognized on the market in the 70s and 80s? And could you tell differences between belts from different manufacturers concerning the looks, the quality, and the durability? Thank you in advance and always take care. Frank from Berlin. And Frank, I'm not meaning to make fun of your questions, but I can tell you're younger because it's changed a lot. This is another of those things that's changed a lot. Back in the 70s, you would be so surprised. First of all, there were no manufacturers of belts. There were wrestlers that made belts. Reggie Parks was the most well-known. Nikita Molkovich made a bunch of the belts that were in a lot of the bigger territories in the 60s and 70s, including the NWA World Tag Team title belts that the Midnight Express wore in 86, the Eaton and Condrey version. Brian, you remember those? I have a replica set of those that I got made here at the castle. I always liked those old, impressive-looking 70s-style belts. Those were Nikita Molkovich belts. And those are the ones that Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez took off with when they left Crockett, and we've talked about that on the show before. But there weren't – not only were there not legitimate replica belts that were available for fans to buy, but, Brian, you know this, there were some fucking rotten-looking, shady, old – beat up belts in a lot of the territories because the promoters did not spend money, and Reggie Parks was probably backed up a year and a half all the time, especially when he was still wrestling. So that it wasn't easy to get belts, and they didn't want to spend the money to make belts, right?
Oh, yes. I didn't realize that was the end. You know, well, the old...
I put a period on the end of my sentence for one.
The old North American title before Bill Watts redid it in 84, that wasn't a very attractive belt.
In Memphis, I hate it when I go back and look at the pictures I took. Memphis had rotten belts. I mean, not just cheap belts, cheap-looking belts that would fall apart, were made great, outlived their usefulness. The original Southern Junior Heavyweight title belt that they started in the tournament in 1952 in Birmingham and used it until Lawler wore it in 76 and they replaced it. He took it home and had it for years, and I loved that belt because it was so old-timey and classic and had the old champion engraved on the date and place he won it and everything on the side plates. It was so cool. And he took it to an appearance years ago somewhere, just to have pictures taken, and somebody got it was at a fair, somebody got in the dressing area and stole it. They've never seen it again. But a lot of the 70s and 80s belts kind of were rotten in Memphis. For a while, the Southern Heavyweight title belt, when the eagle that was on the front of it, the gold eagle fell off of it, they just put a fucking eagle decal on it. And you go back and look at the pictures now with all the belts, and it's like, fuck. But in the major territories, yes, they still had nice-looking belts most of the time. And the champion, when he won them, he was responsible for them. That's why promoters sometimes lost belts, because it was the duty of the champion to have the belts in his bag and take them from one place to the other. In the case of, as we all know, the NWA title, you had to pay a deposit to get the belt, not only to make sure that you were going to do the job at the end, but also that you were going to return the belt. And that's why Ric Flair, for one, never checked the belt. You could count on two things. Ric Flair was going to come on last on the plane first thing in the morning, but dressed in his suit, combing his hair in one hand and with his belt bag in the other hand. That belt never left his sight. And the bond was anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 in those, since the days of Buddy Rogers, depending on the champion and maybe the likelihood that they felt that he might try something shady. In the territories, every belt we won, okay, boom, Midnight Express are the champions. That means we've got the belts. I usually carried them in my bag for the boys, which is why one of my shoulders is lower than the other one. And then when you dropped them, your responsibility was over with. If you lost the fucking belts, chances are you were going to get fired or at least screamed at. And if you were the biggest star in the territory, you'd get screamed at and probably have to fucking pay for it. But if you took off with the belt and just gave no notice, then, you probably weren't going to, even if you did work that territory again, you probably still weren't going to have the belt, so they'd never get it back. But those were the old days. But I mean, in modern times, you would be surprised. The guys in those days, as everything, took it seriously. So except if there was a fucking blow up and a walkout, guys carried the belts, thought a lot about them, took care of them, and turned them back in when they dropped them. As a matter of the U.S. tag belts for Crockett, when they first got those, they weren't painted at all. They were just bright gold and, then had U.S. tag title painted in or whatever. But I took them home and got some red, white, and blue model paint and fucking did all the details in with the shields and the U.S. flag and blah, 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 to make them look better on television. So that was unusual. But I improved them. Most guys put them in their bag with their sweaty towels and, used them in angles, and there was blood on them and shit. Remember, Kerry carved his fucking initials on the domed globe NWA title belt for the week or whatever he had it. But the guys took it seriously in those days. Now that every fan has a belt that looks better and newer than the actual real territories used in those days, and you can get them so easily everywhere that look legitimate. Even the boys don't and the offices don't pay any, because it's not like it's the belt anymore. Yeah, it's the belt if that's the only one you happen to have, but you can get another one. And he probably got another one to begin with, or these days they do. After, certain people in the modern era, made off with a few belts too. But fucking TNA, when I did the goddamn deal with Jeff Jarrett brought me back in a couple of years ago to do the Global Force Wrestling name change, right? And that led Fire Bruce Pritchard and Fire Alberto Del Rio and do all that other shit on TV for that 10 weeks till they all moved to Canada. One of the first thing that I did, was go out and take the belt. And, because Del Rio was no longer the champion, and brought it back and set it where they had all their shit on their table. And they called me after the taping, where's the belt? It's all with all the rest of your shit. Didn't you even pay attention? Oh, fuck. And another time in TNA, it was years ago, like 2007, 8-ish, they did the pay-per-view in St. Louis. They actually had to have a stooge in Florida that could get into the soundstage at Universal Studios to go, because they forgot the belt, because the champion wasn't carrying the belt. So the fucking, production people were supposed to bring it. They forgot the belt. They had the stooge go to the soundstage in Orlando, get the belt, rush it over to the airport and buy it a fucking plane ticket. Put it on the goddamn plane. And they had somebody in St. Louis go to and still didn't get there till the pay-per-view had already started, to pick up the belt at the airport in St. Louis from Delta Airlines. Under the name Belt/Championship. It's stupid, because it meant more in the old days, because there was only one and you couldn't get another one. And the boys took it seriously anyway if they were the champion in most territories. You always had your jack-offs, obviously. But if you had got to the point where anybody in any recognized territory put a belt on you, as I said before, unless you were mad and fucked on a payoff and walking out, you took care of the belt before you did anything else. Of course, there have been some notable examples. Pedro pawned the WWF title belt at one point after a exciting night in New York City. Isn't that how Tom Burke ended up with it?
Yeah, the story goes that Tom Burke was in a consignment shop, a pawn shop in New York City, and they kind of knew that he liked to go through the wrestling magazines and different things they had, and he would purchase things, and they were getting ready to shut down the store to move to Florida, the old couple that owned it. And the man who worked there said, oh, we got a wrestling prop that just came in. And Tom, this is the 70s. He's like, what the hell's a wrestling prop? And they came out with the actual WWF title belt. And Tom couldn't believe it. And he was negotiating with them to make an offer. And I believe what he says is, the man who owned the store was being a little tough on the negotiations. And finally, the woman in the back, his wife, yelled out, "Let him have it. We're selling everything and going to Florida anyway." And Tom got the belt for a steal, and he had it for a number of years. He also has the Killer Kowalski Grand Prix title from Montreal.
Oh, my God. Oh. And it was just out, and you mentioned this off the air, that somebody bought Bruno's WWF belt, and it wasn't the WWE. How the fuck did this take place?
We're not exactly sure. From what I read, it was part of an estate settlement sale, and it was purchased by, this is where it gets a little confusing. There used to be a Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York, and then it moved to Wichita Falls, Texas, but now there's a new International Wrestling Hall of Fame in upstate New York. I believe they got a grant from the state of New York, and they're trying to get things together. I think if the pandemic hadn't happened, things would have been, going a little faster than they are right now. But from what I understand, one of the organizers purchased the Bruno belt. I don't know how much he paid. I don't know. I mean, I didn't hear anything about a Bruno Sammartino estate sale. I would have been in on that. But the belt is now in the custody of this Hall of Fame. Not the WWE and not any of the notable belt hoarders out there.
Well, but I'm astonished on the surface of it, and I'm sure there's more to the story. Maybe Paul Harvey will jump in on this, but it would seem like if it, obviously Bruno kept that belt, so it would have been in his family, and one would think that since they had reconciled at the end, that the family would have contacted, if for nothing else than the best offer, which one would think would come from the WWE, because that's one of the most important pieces of their history. Yeah. And that's actually, but the publicity I saw on it was incorrect in that they said that they acted as if, or inferred that it was. Actually, I think they outright said it was the belt that Bruno wore from 63 through.
No.
Did they not say that?
No, I'm saying he did not get that belt in 63.
Well, that's what I'm fucking about to say, but you're jumping right. Don't you see now, Matthew? You're just jumping all in front of my story here. They said in this publicity that it was the belt that he won from Rogers, and we know that actually that is not true, twice removed, because the belt that Bruno won from Buddy Rogers May 17, 1963 in Madison Square Garden to begin the WWF era was the old United States title that Johnny Barron, his family, found in his attic here a few years back, and that is in the custody of the WWE. The reason why they didn't have a belt is because Rogers had just lost the NWA title to Fez in Toronto that January. They'd forced him to lose it because they knew what he was going to go to Vince exclusively. And they didn't have time. Obviously, they didn't have a world championship belt because they had not ever had a world title specifically based in New York. And we just illustrated how hard it is to get them. So Rogers used Barron's belt. And then the first, correct me when I'm wrong, WWF championship belt was stolen out of Bruno's car after a match at the Garden in, 1965, when he was eating at his favorite Italian restaurant. He came back and the car had been broken into.
That's right. And Chris Jericho stole that gimmick many years later, although I think it was an Outback Steakhouse, not a restaurant.
It was an Outback, I think, rather than a genuine, non-chain, authentic Italian restaurant that Bruno Sammartino would eat in New York City. But at any rate, the belt that he wore after that through the end of his first reign is now in the custody or the hands of, they're not holding it hostage. There's been no ransom note. The International Wrestling Hall of Fame up there, and possibly Triple H might get pissed about that. Who knows? I would think that's something they would want.
Well, I think there's some other belts he would want that he should probably focus on first.
Well, and I can't imagine a belt that he hasn't held at this point, but yeah. Oh, and one more thing. Frank said, what was your favorite belt judging solely from the looks? And I've said this before, because of my childhood memories, I did love that old Southern Junior Heavyweight title belt that Nick Goulas had used it in a tournament in Actually, It wasn't even Goulas then in Birmingham. Goulas was still working the Nashville booking office. Ed Wolf still owned Memphis, or Les Wolf. Let me try that again. And Chris Jordan was still the promoter, I believe, in Birmingham. If Scott Teal's listening, I don't know why he would be. He may be able to. But anyway, they hadn't absorbed Birmingham into the Nashville office yet. Used a lot of the same talent. But that belt had lasted 25 years. And you see Ray Stevens, when he was 22 years old, pictures of him with this belt. And Herb Welch dominated it. And all these classic pictures of these different. And it was the same one. And it looked nothing like any other wrestling belts that I'd ever seen. Because it was done, and Milliken did a great replica of what it would have looked like brand new, which none of us are alive ever saw. And I just love it to death that it was just different in every way. But my all-time favorite was the Fez Belt from the 40s and 50s, the small one, but with the ring built in. It looks like jewelry. And it did have the diamonds, and whether some were real and some were not has been subject of debate, but it was... circled in diamonds and had the wrestling and the chains and the gold and the plates and everything, but it didn't look big enough that it was fucking phony. It looked like jewelry. And if you go back and look at the pictures of, he was on all the color covers of the magazines of the 50s with that thing. And there's a picture of when he and Bockwinkel had their Legends match in Japan and somewhere in the late 70s. He's holding his belt, and Bockwinkel's holding the AWA belt that made in the prison, right? There was that Hansen ran over with the fucking truck or whatever. That was like so big it blotted out the sun. And the picture's classic because I tweeted back. I said, "Imagine which one costs more," because Thez's was made by a jeweler, and all the stones were set and everything, and that's why when Sinclair Broadcasting had bought Ring of Honor, I wanted to bring that design back and make that the Ring of Honor belt because it just looked like something you would have if you had a legitimate championship belt, right? And we checked into it with the folks who know these type of things, and they said, no, it would have cost like $12,000 to replicate it with fake diamonds because you would have had to have everything, all the metal custom done. You'd had to have a jeweler actually set even cubic zirconias or whatever because of the intrinsic nature of the minute, and it has to be in just the right line and everything. So it would have actually cost like 4 or 5 times as much as any championship belt out there today now costs, just because it's unique and, looks real. Anyway, but that's my all-time favorite. And my favorite tag team belts are the NWA belts tag belts that Nikita Milkovich made that I have the replicas of.
I've got a bunch of stuff in my collection, and I think a lot of collectors have a lot of stuff on Marvin Atomic Mercer, because he was a guy very similar to Gene Stanley in that it seems that he did tons of his own publicity. Yeah. Mailed out tons of things. But all the things I have, it says Marvin Atomic Mercer, holder of the Edge Strangler Lewis belt. Do you know anything about that?
No. As relates to Marvin Mercer, no. I know that there obviously Strangler Lewis had a belt. I don't know why or how Marvin Mercer never beat Strangler Lewis. Could it have been that there was a fucking shadiness, or did Lewis, Strangler Lewis was married 5 times, went broke numerous times. He was the highest paid professional athlete in the United States on numerous occasions, but he, drank and gambled. I can see that somebody could have ended up with his belt. But as far as beating him to hold it, that's a different story. Right. But, and that was that. You've seen the pictures from the 30s. It was, once again, it was really tinier. They didn't go for huge shit in those days because it wouldn't have been real. It was supposed to be some kind of a valuable, trophy that you won instead of some big goddamn, fucking spinny, sparkly fake thing.
Are you surprised boxing has never gone the route of wrestling in terms of their belts? Like, their belts look very similar to the way they've looked for decades now.
Well,
they don't have like a big wrestling belt. It's boxing have very unique and defined belts.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of that because they've kept it traditional and it can be more legitimate that way rather than the big. Because, now the Triple H sends every sports team or every sports figure that wins something their own championship belt. Yes, it increases, awareness of the WWE and the branding and all that stuff. But at the same time, I see fans, like I said, at conventions that have belts that, Sam Muchnick would have dreamed of having a belt that beautiful back in the. They're so plentiful now that it doesn't seem like a big fucking deal anymore. It's not. And I've never seen anybody get so much heat. Actually, in a lot of ways, but George Barnes and Bill Dundee, when they first came to the United States, Bobby Shane had recommended in Australia because they didn't use the local guys over there in top positions. And Barnes and Dundee were an incredible fucking heel team. They were fucking good. They were the best that I'd ever seen at that point in time because they were completely different than the Von Brauners and the interns and, et cetera. But they, so anyway, Shane says, go to Tennessee. Don't work for Nick Goulas, work for Jerry Jarrett. So they got the paperwork and they came in and automatically he had them do this fucking thing where, you fucking Yanks are weak and shit. And they would drag the belts behind them, the old Southern Tag Team title belts that I think they looked like a design that Malkovich may have made something like that also, but they had been using them for years and years. And they were starting to fall apart anyway at that point. And Barnes and Dundee would come out. They wouldn't wear them. They said they're not going to wear these cheap Yank belts. And they wouldn't put them around their waist. They would drag them by one end behind them as they walked. And when they got to about 10 feet from the ring, they'd just pitch them into the ring over the top rope and leave them laying there in a heap and then stand there over the top of them when they got in the ring. And the people, before the baby faces came out, the people would be trying to climb in the ring. Don't you treat those belts like that, you motherfucker, just because they made an issue of it. These were the things that all these teams had fought over. And the announcers say, well, I can't believe they're disrespecting the championship belts like that. And they'd put the Americans down and their weak champions and their garbage belts. And that was heat. And now, what the fuck? The only way the fans would get mad if you mistreated the belts is if you snatched theirs.
I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was Enzo. But I could possibly be wrong because it didn't make a big impact on me until this moment where I'm trying to remember it. But we saw some video of someone like out in the street with fans being interviewed by like TMZ and they had their belt on. I think it had to be Enzo. It had to be Enzo.
If it's not, he's pissed he didn't think of it.
Were there any guys, before 2000 that would do that ever got in trouble for just wearing the belt around or taking it with them? Were there any guys that were marks for having the belt? And wanted everyone to know it?
There's been a few. I've heard a few stories in the past, especially young guys that, that's their first push and it's the first time they've won a belt. The other guys in the locker room would get together, and get on them, go, yeah, you got to show that everywhere, right? And they'd make them wear it in a buffet when they were on a trip. Like they're driving from Charlotte to Raleigh. The guy's got to go in wearing his belt. And just see people laugh or go, what the fuck is going on here? They would rib guys like that. And there have been more than one guy though that would go the extra mile to fucking show it off. I think Buddy Landell did that a time or two, in Tennessee, but they'd show up at fucking car lots or whatever. But most of the guys realized, time and place. They took themselves very seriously, but they didn't have to, but there has also, I would think, probably been, now that I think about it, more occasions of a guy having conjugal bliss with a rat while he was wearing his belt than probably has worn it into a buffet or been conned into fucking taking it out and making himself look like an idiot. And there have been a few that took it seriously as well, but a lot of the belt has been a prop in a lot of the connubial fucking exploits of a number of wrestlers.
I have to think that'd be some of the smaller belts. Some of those other belts may get in the way. The North American title, Jesus.
In some cases, they could be placed in certain positions so as to enhance some photography, candid photography. And then there would... if let's say sometime, God damn it, you're in fucking Poughkeepsie and they've actually left the WWF belt because they did the holdup thing at Raw, and you got to take it home, and you can't get it to the office till the next day, and you've got it there, and you got some film in your camera. Well, but anyway.
Oh my.
Oh my. We need to play that mash up again. Oh my. Oh my. All right, what else you got? I'll tell you, here's one thing though. I've got to say, without fear of contradiction, that is another thing that is missing. Not only the impact of it, but also the pleasure, the fun of the whole thing is missing of candid photography, especially as it relates to the wrestling business. Now that they got the fucking phones and you can take a picture anywhere, you don't have to have it developed. You can send it anywhere. You can broadcast it all over the world. My God, imagine if that had been able to happen in the 70s and 80s in the wrestling business. But it used to be that, first of all, you had to find your willing pigeon. And of course, there were, back in those days, before we ruined the atmosphere, there were millions of willing pigeons around the wrestling business. But then you had to have somewhat professional equipment because Polaroids just did. Some guys like Polaroids, but no. You had to have some professional equipment. Then you got to have a place to fucking develop them. So you've got to establish that fucking relationship. And then you've got to have a way of displaying them nicely while at the same time not just fucking, keeping them around willy-nilly where anybody could fucking find them. And it was a nice little fucking hobby.
How do you display them nicely?
Well, in an album or something, of that nature. As a matter of fact, Stan, God damn it, Stan won't get mad at me at this point. But way before Stan met the love of his life and was married and lives happily ever after in that fashion, the Gangster of Love had an amazing multiple volume photo album collection of many of the friends that he had made in the wrestling business. And one fucking night in Charlotte, I don't know why, he had heard or read something on TV, because I've told you Stan was a little police phobic. He would never make a U-turn. He would drive 2 miles down the road out of his way to not make an illegal U-turn when we were lost and late to the building. In some cases, I felt like he thought that there was a satellite launched by the United States government with the intention of just keeping an eye on Stan Lane, waiting for him to fuck up. One time we were trying to find the Orange Bowl in Miami for the 87 Great American Bash, and he's the one that fucking lived in Florida, and we're lost as fucking a ball in high weeds, and he's got to piss. And we're not in a good neighborhood of Miami. So he pulls behind his fucking shutdown business, and he says, "You watch for the cops." And he fucking opens the door, and he's got shorts on anyway, so he just puts his feet out, and he just kind of pulls the shorts aside. He's not all the way out, and he's fucking pissing. And right as he gets about midstream, I go, "Shit, there's a cop." And he fucking jumps back in the fucking, puts his feet back in the fucking car and slams the door, and the only thing he forgot to do was stop pissing. And oh boy, he was pissed. He was pissed about that. But anyway, Stan one night in Charlotte, he had seen some news story, or he heard some story, whatever. And he, in his mind, even though he was a careful young man that all checked IDs, he was convinced that some of those photos may have looked like that those young ladies were underage, and he tossed them all. I was like, "Fuck, you could have given them to me." He said, "Well, I didn't want anybody to think, I said, "Well, what were they? Was somebody going to get a fucking warrant to come and look at your personal porn stash and knock on your doors and come on, Lane, show us the goods? What the fuck?" He's the one guy in wrestling that never does anything wrong except punch that one guy's fucking face in. But anyway, I digress. So that's another thing that is not as fun as it used to be, is having the belts as props and doing some candid photography and having a nice collection that you could enjoy in years to come. But I'll tell you one thing has improved. As I sometimes go back and look at photographs from the 70s, 80s even, and I see photographs of today, hygiene is so much better on both parties, the male and the female. Because we didn't used to think about manscaping back then. And every once in a while, if you found somebody with a landing strip, you're like, holy wow, she's wild. But that was about as far as it got. Well, one time I knew one girl that used to shave a little heart shape just so she would know that you'd know that she appreciated it. But anyway, the point is, we were a hairy fucking bunch back then, but no more. Because now, not only is there deadly diseases around, but also we've learned more about hygiene and the fact that mildew does grow faster in a humid area filled with weeds than it does in sunlight and dryness. And that's why that the folks at Manscaped have been our favorite friends here on the program over the past several months and years. Is that not correct, Brian? They've been our favorites overall because they keep us slicker than come on a gold tooth as far as our personal grooming.
They are a great friend of the Jim Cornette experience and, of course, Jim Cornette's Drive Thru. Absolutely.
Well, guess what they're doing now? We've talked about the plow. We've talked about the lawnmower. We've talked about their packages, potions, and lotions. But now, the one so far overlooked area has been rectified. Well, I shouldn't say that because you'll think it's the asshole and I'm leading you in a different direction. But it's been rectified because, ladies and gentlemen, they have just released from Manscaped the Weed Whacker. The Weed Whacker is the most state-of-the-art nose and ear hair trimmer ever made. Now, I've been using my lawnmower to trim the hair on my ears because it's good for that, but it's not shaped for that. Well, the Weed Whacker is shaped exactly what you need to get those plugs out of your nose or the hard, because when you do your ears with the lawnmower, you have to reach in there and you have to pull the hair all the way out several times to get it straightened out because it's curled, and then try to whack it real quick before it curls back up. Well, that's what I do.
How
I don't
long
know how
are the
you do
hairs
it.
in your ear?
Well, you can find them. They hide in there because the lawnmower has not been shaped for your ear. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Brian Last. You're not listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth. This is shaped right. You can stick this right in your ear and get all them fucking hairs where they hide. Also, the nose. Now, I got to admit, when I'm driving down the road, feeling hungry and cold, I thought I'd find me some food to drink. No, that's another song. When I'm driving down the road and I got nothing else to do, every once in a while, I'll start trying to determine with my fingers whether or not that any of my nose hairs are longer than my nostrils. Because you got nose hairs, you can't really get around it. They're going to come back time and time again, but you just keep them where they're not so long that they droop out of your nose. Because nothing looks worse than a motherfucker walking around with fucking hairs coming out of his nose, right? You've just lost all hope there. He's the lost pile cousin, Gomer, Goober, and Hairy Nose. So when you walk around, you're looking like that, you look like a fucking idiot. You look like an outlaw mud show goof. So I'm driving down the road, and if I reach into my nostril with my thumb and forefinger and I pull the hair out and I can feel it coming out farther than into my nostril, I'll get right on the end of it and I'll pluck it. And that fucking hurts. And it'll bring a tear to your eye. But then I'll look down and I'll see, well, there's a big hair, maybe a couple of hairs there, and that's hair that ain't going to hang out of my nose. And then Stacy has caught me doing that on a couple of occasions. And she remarked on the fact that not only will I jerk it, but then I'll look at it just to make sure it's there. Well, that makes you look pretty fucking stupid too, come to find out, because people are sitting there watching you just jerking fucking hairs out of your nose one at a time with your thumb and forefinger, and you look like a goddamn idiot. So the Weed Whacker is going to fix all that up because it has the proprietary skin-safe technology, prevents nicks, snags, and tugs in your delicate holes. And I'm not going to ask you what other holes you might be going to use this for. Manscaped Weed Whacker uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system intelligently contoured to enhance the trimming experience. It's waterproof, easy operation and cleaning, and it's the only nose hair trimmer on the market with a powerful, rechargeable lithium-ion battery that lasts for up to 90 minutes of use. And I gotta be quite honest with anybody out there. If you need anywhere near 90 minutes to trim the hair in your nose, you have got significant other problems in your life that you need to address before you buy this product. So anyway, and I'm just being honest. I don't want to insult anybody. And when you get this deal where you can whack your weeds and make it a time to look forward to, you can get a replaceable blade every 3 months to keep the thing, sharp and etc. They have polled and said 79% of partners polled admitted that long nose hair is a major sexual turnoff for them. I'm wondering who the other 21% are. And I bet I'd like to meet them because I bet they're easy. Anyway, it's time to upgrade your Manscaped routine with the Weed Whacker. And thanks to us, me and the great Brian Last, who are nose hair free, and as a matter of fact, fucking oxygen's whistling up my nostrils like fucking whale shit through an ice flow, just slickered and come on a gold tooth because I got no hair in the way to block it. 20% off and free shipping with the code, and this is a special one, DRIVE, WW, DRIVEWW, DRIVE, WW. That's the code at manscaped.com to get 20% off and free shipping for the Weed Whacker. So go ahead, you fucking whackers, whack your weeds. Now this also, it is in the UK, it's called a Weed Wanker.
Really? Okay.
Actually, no, I just made that up.
I figured as much, but once again, you love your British slang. Whenever you get a chance, you like to...
I thought you were going to say you love your wankers.
You love your wanks. But let's get some questions here, Jim. Of course, the Cult of Cornette has inundated our inbox with many, many questions, and let me start with this one because it has become a very popular topic in the last day or so. SmackDown had a very interesting opening segment where there was a hit-and-run accident with a rental car and the arrest of Jeff Hardy. I sent you a clip. Have you had a chance to review this, and what are your thoughts on this angle?
I reviewed the 4-minute edited-together clip that served as the open of their package of their open or whatever the fuck. I didn't see it live as it happened, but I got the gist of it enough. You know what the shame of it all is? The shame of it all is they put more effort into trying to make that whole thing look legitimate than almost anything else they have done that I've seen in recent memory. Once again, I don't watch everything, but we did do watch-alongs of a variety of their programs for a while. They thought you could tell that the writers all got together and gave the cops lines like, hey, just give us some room. We're trying to do our job, to explain why that they. Well, I won't pick it apart right now. Point is, they actually, it seemed like they were trying. And it also seemed like the people that were trying, and I know that some of the talent had been involved in real arrests, but nobody on the creative team apparently has really ever been arrested. First of all, because it was garbage and horseshit from the start, and we'll explain why in a second. Secondly, the one thing you want to try to make legitimate and real about wrestling and your wrestling program is to call attention to embarrassing stuff involving your talent that I'm sure the talent would like not to exploit on fucking national television. With bad choices or moments of misjudgment or whatever, and he's got or if any case is still open, how does that look possibly if he's parodying or making mockery of or taking off on, as they say down south, his real life problems on a television program? How does that look for his real life issues if he's still got any cases open? Why would you do that to begin with? I didn't hate it as much as I did when Heyman took advantage of Sunny and had her get on, and when he was trying to do shock television and Jerry Springer bullshit on ECW in the 90s and talk about her drug problems and various problems, because that was bullshit because he was supposed to be their friend. Of course, he wasn't. It's obviously, there's been a lot of cases. Chris Candido's own lips said, well, we kind of lost the house we were living in because Paul let us run all those expenses up on our credit card and then never paid us back when he made Chris assistant booker so Chris would pay for ECW talent plane tickets. Anyway, then he publicly, not shamed or ridiculed, but just publicly exposed Tammy on television going through all that shit when she was going through a bad time. One of the times she was going through a bad time, and it's not something that a friend would do, TV ratings or no. This is nobody's personal friends. It's a big corporation, but just the irony of the thing they try to make look legitimate, even though it didn't, they tried, is a thing that's centered on something embarrassing about the talent and one of the company's talents, personally and professionally. What the fuck? First of all, it was a fake fucking bunch of cops like anybody couldn't tell that has ever been arrested. And also Jeff was handcuffed, by the way, cuffed and stuffed before he was ever apprised of his rights, so he should call Stephen P. New. You've been arrested, Brian, I'm sure numerous times.
Not once.
What?
Never been arrested.
You're from New York. You've never been arrested.
I'm from New York. I've never been arrested. Most people have not been arrested.
Well, I find that hard to believe. Most people around wrestling or just most people? Well, anyway, nevertheless, fake cops, you go back and look at the police car, and there's no fucking town on the goddamn police car. It's fake fucking stickers, fake uniforms. The cops don't act that way. This would not have happened. When they followed Jeff with the camera while they were dragging him out so long, if it had been highlights, you could have got by with a little bit of it where people couldn't look too close or get the picture, but they made sure to go with it so long where the cops are saying the same thing and Jeff's staggering around saying, "What's happened? I don't understand," to where you could see the holes in that. Braun Strowman, as an actor, he makes a good disgruntled strong man. They could have kept that out of there, and it might have been a little bit more legitimate, although none of their female on-air talent is going to be mistaken for fucking, Andrea Mitchell or, goddamn Phyllis Newman. If we go way back for the fucking female newscasters. You can't make something like that look legitimate unless you actually go ahead and just have the fucking guy arrested. But besides that, why Jeff's trying to get his shit together. Why fucking bring that up in his life? Something I'm sure he'd rather not. And even if he comes out and says, "Oh, I was all on board with it," why would you be, and why would the company want to do it? Spend the goddamn time and effort that you did to make it look legitimate that you're arresting one of your legendary talents that actually has had a substance issue and really been arrested over it, whether it's in the subject of your mock storyline or not. Put all that effort in a positive way, whether heel or babyface, just something positive. Getting one of your fucking talents over is something different, instead of fucking bad acting and bullshit drama that these fucking comedy writers, well, it wasn't comedy this time. Now they branched out into the dramatic arts, the wrestling comedy writers that have never sniffed a fucking bump. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure they've sniffed plenty of bumps. I'm talking about wrestling bumps. That have never been in the ring and don't know what the fuck. They can't figure this out, so they're trying to write based off television shows they're fans of. I don't fucking know. I mean, what did you think?
Well, first, let me send my best wishes to Elias on his recovery. I hope everything works out all right. Maybe, who knows, maybe this will be a moment for the Possum King and him to come together, a hospital room visit to check on his old rival. Or perhaps the Possum King was driving the car. What do you think?
Well, now some fingers are pointing at the fucking pasty, fucking translucent Scotsman. What's this, Sheamus? I saw something on the internet saying, well, this looks like something that to further the Sheamus storyline or something, their involvement or what. And here's another thing. The fucking guy didn't even have the balls to do it like Lawler did and at least get run over in the parking lot in front of God and everybody. Eddie and Doug Gilbert ran that motherfucker over on live television, and he went up over the top of the car, not just the fucking hood. if you're going to goddamn do something, at least do it with balls. Of course, here's the thing. Now we say they're in a car wreck every week as a joke. Now they'll start doing that. Lawler took that bump one time in fucking 25 years of being on top on Memphis TV, and they called the cops and reported attempted murder. The people watching at home. Now the guys are run over by golf carts, cement mixers, bread trucks, milk trucks. I wish, you know what? Travis Heckel, draw a picture of me and the milkman in the milk truck running over one of the goddamn fucking all petite wrestling guys. Nobody'd think anything of it now. Nobody would think anything of it. Run over him. That's what the fuck difference does it make?
What did you think of the detective work? Sniffing the bottle in the car.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's that. We want to take you downtown and ask you some questions. Who the fuck is Jack Webb on the fucking crew now? When have you ever heard a cop say that? I have been fucking put in backs of police cars on a couple of different occasions. And I can inform you that they don't talk to you like that. Fuck. It's just, what are the... I mean, Michael Hayes is still up there on the creative team, isn't he? I can guarantee you Michael can give chapter and verse if he can remember the times he's been arrested on how it goes.
Has Bruce been arrested that you know of?
You know, that's a good...
Because SmackDown is his show, isn't it?
How and why would he never got enough heat as a manager, cause a riot or anything? I guess I don't think Bruce has ever been arrested. Son of a gun. There's one in the wrestling business from a while back.
Well, there's still time.
He can be arrested for tailgating Vince too close. All right. Anyway. Did we answer a question there? What was that? Where did that come from?
The question was your thoughts about this angle, which again is a hot button issue right now. It was on SmackDown.
Hated it. It just why? Just come on. And I mean, he smells like alcohol, and I'm not drinking, and then he sees Elias. Oh my God! And it just. They spent all that time and effort trying to make that believable, but nobody's apparently ever. It would take you 30 seconds to fact check any of that, but at the same time, why would you want people to believe that? Yeah, because nobody's going to fucking. They've been watching. This is a television show now. They watch TV. They're doing fucking episodes of goddamn T.J. Hooker instead of wrestling. I get away from it. Bah.
AEW is going more down the road of comedy wrestling, and WWE is obviously getting into drama. All right. Well,
yeah.
Before you pass out, let's get some more questions here.
Yeah.
This one was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Tom C. in Las Vegas, Nevada. I believe I've heard Jim speak before about his dislike for the buckle bomb move that has injured many wrestlers, most notably ending Sting's in-ring career. I'm curious as to Jim's thoughts on WWE finally banning the unnecessary move.
Well, imagine that. They actually do something positive for a change. Why? That's, of course, I don't think anybody in WWE does this, but AEW ought to follow suit with that stupid fucking reverse Hurricane Rana where it just dumps you backwards on your fucking head. Yes, they should have done that. I was against them banning the pile driver because that's stupid. It's just you should ban certain people doing the pile driver, don't know how to do it. I've been pile driven. I've been pile driven on a number of occasions by people that know what the fuck that they were doing, and I'd rather take that than a body slam. But it's just when people, obviously, it's always when people don't know what they're doing, but the pile driver as just the concept of the move itself should never have been banned. And you can actually, it's one of the things you can do well and safely, and it looks nasty, and you can get mileage out of it and make a banned move in storyline instead of reality, as I've done many times in the past wherever I've been. But the buckle bomb, yes, you can't fucking see where you're going. You can't see where you're throwing the guy necessarily. Obviously, there's a large margin of error, and it's fucking stupid because you can't even take a bump. So yes, I'm glad they fucking threw that out with the old wash.
Ended Sting's career, just hurt Kairi Sane in that Nia Jax match a couple weeks ago. When did it start?
I think that's one of those, mid 2000 era Ring of Honor things, or just indie wrestling things in general. When they were, concentrating on spots and making a bunch of stuff up, people started doing that, I believe. I don't really know the origination of it, but it's just, yes, I can see where the thought comes that if you do it right, this is what's supposed to happen, but it's still not impressive because you're not taking any fucking bump. You're just, if you do it safely, it's not impressive. If you do it recklessly, then it looks dangerous, and that's because it is.
Other than the reverse Hurricane Rana, especially on the apron, as we just saw in the MJF Jungle Boy match, any other moves you think should be banned?
Well, just common sense used to dictate what guys did. Common sense and the booker and or promoter. Some guy, Chris Colt, would obviously be somebody who'd want to go as far as he possibly could, but in a lot of cases, he would be told not to do things or take bumps or whatever the fuck. But common sense should dictate, stay away from doing this stupid shit on the fucking apron. I despise the top rope stuff where there's obvious cooperation between the two people to hold each other up there so that they can execute something. If you're really fighting, why are you standing up there on tiptoes in an unstable environment? Because one guy would be able to knock the other guy off instantly. Would they not? Would they not?
You would think so, yes.
Okay, so yes, it's just a small thing, but the reason why the superplex and all that shit off the second rope got over is because you could actually kind of do it. If a guy's climbing up to come off the top rope and you run up the other side, the inside, and you've got your feet on the second rope, you can brace on the top rope, you can snatch him and do whatever quick. But now they come up with this overly contrived shit off the very tippy top, both of them, just so it can be a bigger bump, but it's already phony by the time they get there because you can see they're cooperating, so it means nothing. So I would ban anybody both getting on the top rope at the same time unless we had the second coming of, fucking Sayama and Billington, for fuck's sake. And just, there's not even moves to ban now because people on every show do some goofy move that's never been seen before, whether by accident or on purpose. So it's not banning specific moves. It's trying to have some common sense as to what is ridiculously risky, what is ludicrous from a standpoint of visual credibility, and use common sense. And that worked for years when the guys actually had common sense instead of trying to make it harder on themselves to do shit.
Our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Josh Creek in Des Moines, Iowa. I was wondering Jim's thoughts on Ric Flair stating he would like to have one more match against Roman Reigns at age 71. Does Jim think Rick can still go?
I did not hear him say that. God damn. Well, to be honest, even right now, Ric Flair and Roman Reigns with the proper build-up, and if they did it right for a short period of time, could probably get something entertaining and not be garbage, but it wouldn't be Ric Flair because of his health issues that he's had in the past. And I mean, I don't train with him every day, and I know he still does. He's for the fact that he's been in a plane crash, had a broken back, took bumps for 40 years, had a number of injuries, neck and etc. Then has had health problems and surgeries, and has lived the personal life that he's led. He's still fucking Superman. Nobody else could have lived through all that shit. And that's why even when he was seriously ill, we didn't know about it till afterwards, but nobody kind of took it seriously because, okay, it's Flair. It's not like anything bad could happen to him. So they could probably walk and talk, as we used to say, through something. But no, I don't think he should try to have a Ric Flair match with Roman Reigns or anybody else at this point, just because I'd worry about Rick, because I love him.
And that's probably exactly what he would try to do.
And he would try, yes, he would try to have he'd take a slam off the top after they've been fucking rooting around in his goddamn bowels and intestines. He'd do it in a heartbeat. So I admire his tenacity. And if he would have a old bullshit kind of manager match with Roman Reigns, they could still get it over because he's a fucking psychological genius and it's Flair. But I wouldn't want him to try to do the shit that he's always done.
Do you think he should have come back after the retirement match at WrestleMania? Because obviously he came back, he had matches in Impact, he wrestled Hulk Hogan in Australia, I think. Do you think he should have come back after the retirement match?
I don't even know if I can criticize that. It's probably the retirement match was it would have been a nice storybook for him to go out on the biggest one, right? But still, it's like, were you going to tell Terry Funk not to come back and do that fucking match with Lawler in Jackson, Tennessee in 2016 when he first retired in 1983, and it was the best match on the show? It was the only thing worth pretty much watching for the people at that point. Anytime anybody gets a chance to see Babe Ruth play baseball, even if they aren't as young as they used to be or have a little bit of a gut, I give guys at that level a pass on coming back and doing a few matches, as long as it's not just something where they just, goddamn, like a Always Sunny sketch where they fucking come out and goddamn break their leg in 10 seconds.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Craig O. Waffles in Lakeland, Florida. In a recent interview, Dan Spivey said that the reason the Skyscrapers couldn't get over, despite him being so good in the ring and Sid Vicious eventually getting better, was because of the Road Warriors' backstage politicking and because the Steiner brothers were so over. What in the hell is this curtain jerker going on about?
Well, he's right about the Steiner brothers. They were so over, and the Skyscrapers had nothing to do with getting the Steiner brothers over. As a matter of fact, the matches I saw between the Steiners and the Skyscrapers almost got the Steiners under because they were so fucking ugly. The Road Warriors didn't backstage politic. That makes it sound like Hawk and Animal or even Ellering were coming to the booker or to the creative team or the producers or whatever they were called in those days and go, oh, we really ought to win this, or boy, you ought to put the belts on us, or we could really have. No, you already knew what the Road Warriors would or would not do, and in the rare gray area, such as at that Starrcade round robin Iron Man thing where we had to get a job out of them, that's when Ric Flair would go directly to, well, actually he sent me because he thought I might be able to, because I had a good finish. And I couldn't, the finish for the Road Warriors and the Steiners that I came up with was they would, two babyface teams, but they would get in a fucking four-way. And as they would get in the four-way, Scotty would have fucking Hawk trapped in a bear hug to belly suplex him, right? Because that was Scotty's thing, at big belly to belly. But at the same time, Animal would press Rick over his head and press slam him. But when Rick came down from the slam, he would be right behind and allegedly clip fucking goddamn. No, wait. Hold on. How was this? It's been 30 years. The point is, fucking the press Hawk would have been going for the fucking press slam on Scott when fucking Animal press slammed Rick, but Rick would have clipped Hawk's leg and Scott would have dropped on top, and 1, 2, 3. So the Road Warriors beat themselves, but kind of the fucking Steiners, because this is what we were going to try to sell the Road Warriors. But the Steiners would go over. Did I paint that picture after I fucked it up properly?
I think so. It's been 30 years.
Well, yeah, thank a lot. The 2 press slams from the Road Warriors who are shining, but 1 press slam causes the other guy to get fucked. They didn't like it. I said, all right, what do you want to do? They came up with the fucking double suplex, one guy raise his fucking shoulder thing that everybody had done fucking for years and years in that situation. I'm like, God damn it. I thought at least mine was more creative, even if it's still bullshit. But anyway, but you knew what the Road Warriors were and weren't going to do. They didn't have to come and politic. Dusty would always go to him and say, okay, we're going to do a program with the fucking Russians. Here's ideas. And they had the, bench press challenge ideas and stuff. And you knew you don't ask them for a job because you're not going to get it. But really, the Road Warriors still at that point in the 80s should not have been being beaten because that was a big part of the gimmick. But they also they didn't have to come and whine and gripe and ask to be used because they were already automatically, as amongst highest paid guys in the company and the most over, going to be used in big spots. So Spivey's whining and griping about their politicking to explain why, well, the Steiners were over and so were the Road Warriors. And actually, the Midnight Express and Doom were kind of too, just not us, is basically what it was, because Sid was green and Spivey was always the shits. He was always the shits. Go back and watch those. Remember we watched the 1989 Great American Bash, Dudes versus Skyscrapers? And Shane Douglas was the best worker in the fucking ring. And unfortunately for Spivey, Laurinaitis, for the first time in his life, was not the 4th worst worker in the ring. He was only number 3 because Spivey fucked everything up. What was the question?
Dan Spivey saying the Road Warriors' politics is why the Skyscrapers didn't get over.
Yeah, well, good for you.
When you guys were building into Wrestle War 90, a wild thing to see, available through your cable company, but I remember the whole fucking rap. It was supposed to be Road Warrior Skyscrapers. Before that, Spivey had some sort of neck injury, but then he was supposed to be back, and then from what we had talked about recently on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, reviewing this time period, it sounds like he walked out on the NWA. Is that what happened?
I can't fucking remember. To be honest with you, because one or the other for most of because the Skyscrapers, they remember them because it was kind of a period where people were paying attention. I won't call it a hot period because business was down, but the TBS takeover and ownership and et cetera, in those first couple of years, people were paying a lot of attention, let's say, to it, whether good or bad. The Skyscrapers did not have a long run. The Skyscrapers, I guarantee you, if we went back and looked at the fucking documents, maybe this is a good thing for one of the cult members to do, I bet you they weren't a team for 4 months. But people just remember it because Sid went on to, other notorious things later on, and they were big. And it was a time where a lot of people were paying attention to what the fuck was going on, but that one of them was always hurt. And remember, that's why, then we ended up, as we've talked about recently, getting the 3rd Skyscraper, Mean Mark Calloway from Memphis, who was Master of Pain. Remember Sid had a punctured lung?
Yeah. Was that from the Steiners?
Supposedly, but here's the thing. The Steiners were suplexing Sid when they wanted to, and there wasn't shit he could do about it, but he wasn't happy about it. And supposedly he was in the goddamn airport on the way, maybe St. Louis, maybe he had already connected from Memphis somewhere, but he's on the way to a show and he gets short of breath and he has chest pains and he collapses and he gets and then he realizes he's got a punctured lung from a rib that not of the funny kind, but of one of his ribs that had punctured his lung, apparently, from a match a day or 2 or 3 beforehand, and he's walking through the airport and just notices this, which to me, okay, I heard that, and oh, shit, and he was out for a while. Well, that was 1990. In 1997, when I experienced him at the Monday Night Raw in San Antonio, in between segment 1 interview and segment 7, when he's supposed to be out on the stage doing some shit, And he tells downtown Bruno, Harvey Whippleman, I think I'm having a heart attack. You want to go to the hospital? No, take me back to the hotel. Now I wonder how good Sid was about diagnosing his own illnesses. He could just disappear in a fucking heartbeat. And so anyway, like I said, first was it Spivey was hurt and Sid was there, and then Sid was hurt, Spivey was there, and then boom, Sid was hurt and out, and Mark came in, and then Spivey was gone, and Teddy Long sold Mean Mark to Heyman. And I guarantee you that the Skyscrapers were not a team for more than 4 months, or at least not consecutively or cumulatively in appearances together.
All right. Well,
am I positive enough about Spivey? I'm positive so. He sucked.
No, he wasn't very good. You got to be honest about it. Well, let's now go to the equal time portion of this podcast.
That's good.
You know, we had a lot to say about Chris Jericho this past week on The Experience, and we both were talking.
Somebody tweeted the part of Jim Cornette for the first 18 minutes of this segment was played by great Brian Last. You were quite pointed.
Well, apparently I shouldn't even say touched a nerve. Apparently we really spoke for a lot of other people, because a ton of emails have come in with people saying thank you, or that's what I've been saying for years, or I've been waiting for someone to say that. I did not expect that reaction, however.
We're the voice of the soulless.
Not everyone is soulless. So as part of equal time here, let's read one. And Jim, I'll let you grade this promo at the end of it.
All right.
This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Dylan Hodge. Hey, Brian Last, fuck you. You're just pissed because you have to live in the shadow of Jim Cornette and say you don't like modern wrestling, because if you didn't, you would be out of a fucking job. Say what you want about AEW, but Chris Jericho is one of the best wrestlers this business has ever fucking created. You're just a whiny bitch because you're a failed wrestler. And you love music.
Wait, what?
Well, let me finish. And you love music, but you can't be a rock star. Is it our fault your mom kept you closeted your whole life and you were finally able to see the light once you turned 18? Chris is everything you're not and everything you want to be. That's why you can't stand him. Because he did better than you. Fuck you, you Hawaii 5-0 reject. Killed the wrestling business. Ha ha. Sounds to me like you don't want to kill your image. You lack talent. And the last thing you will ever fucking be is a wrestler. And that just grinds your gears. You can't fucking take it. It crawls at your skin. I get to talk to big wrestlers now, in quotes. Yeah, they only brought you into their group because they feel sorry for you. Not because you're any good. Suck a dick and get off cornies. And that was sent by Dylan Hodge. What are your thoughts on this promo, Jim?
Well, I guess Dylan did the best he could with what he had to work with, but it regurgitated many of the all petite wrestling talking points. Very lackluster, possibly boring, even use of profanity with no ground broken in terms of, you know, a cutting edge insult like the felt gargling blunder cunt example or whatever, or any of the cockwombles or the fine European and Old English insults that we've come to favor here on The Experience. And also, I didn't know that they were naming 14-year-old girls Dylan these days, but otherwise than that, I guess it was okay. Brian, what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, I think he hit the nail on the head. I just can't take it that I didn't make it as a professional wrestler. Of course, as everyone knows, I tried really hard to break into the wrestling business.
At a Smoky Mountain wrestling camp one Saturday afternoon, you tried really hard to break into when you were 16, but you decided not to, and have since been successful.
That's right.
After that.
And he's right. I love music, but I can't be a rock star. Another one, he hit the nail on the head, and my mom kept me closeted until I was 18. For the record, I moved out at 17. So, Dylan. But
you moved out of the closet at 17?
I moved out of the closet into the light At 17 years
Well, you know
old.
what Pork Chop Cash said when he'd switched babyface in Memphis? Once seen the light, can't walk in the dark.
I did not know that. No.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, he had and a fan made a T-shirt for him because he didn't have a ring jacket. So it said, once seen the light, can't walk in the dark. And he would come bopping down the aisleway with that fucking shirt. I love Pork Chop Cash.
Well, let's get another question here.
Anyway, fuck you, Dylan.
Hey, be nice. Let's be positive.
Oh, okay. I'm positive. I'd like to fuck you, Dylan.
Well, what?
Well, I mean, with some inanimate object.
This took a turn here.
Not in a friendly way, but rather in a hate-filled, violent sexual assault way. I guess I don't. Fuck you, but that's everybody says fuck you. Well, if you actually do have to fuck the guy, how are you going to fuck him if you're mad at him?
I always liked it when someone would say fuck you to someone you'd hear, oh, no, thank you. It's like, oh, what a good comeback. It's so simple. Disarms the person.
I always like back in the old days, especially in the South, people would get up over the rail and go, Cornette, you ain't shit. No, but you are. Well, wait a minute. Anyway.
Our next question was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Chris O'Mealy. Greetings from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And no, I'm not Amish. I'm curious to know what Jim's thoughts are on Rob Van Dam as both a wrestler and a person.
Oh God, I've said before, and I know Rob. Obviously, we've met, but we never spent any significant time around each other. So we've never had any cross words. But I don't really know him as a person. He was not. I was already in Louisville when he came to WWE, right? I was already back down here.
Yeah, because he came in right when ECW went out of business. So what is that?
Yeah,
2001.
Yeah, so really we've met at some fan fests, and not that often because he hadn't been that active, in recent years. But anyway, nevertheless, as a wrestler, I got to be honest with this is both. This is not an evisceration. This is both a compliment and a negative, but at the same time, it mostly comes out positive. I always thought he was the modern day Antonino Rocca. He did shit that nobody else could get away with, that's awkward, that you ain't supposed to be doing it, but he could do it somehow and get away with it, and his flexibility belied his size. For all the people who have tried to work like Rob Van Dam, it's been the worst thing ever in the history of the fucking business because nobody else can do that, but he could do that shit and get away with it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you putting Rocket into the equation is interesting because he was so unique in that time period. No one wrestled like that.
Yeah.
Pfeffer may have tried to have someone wrestle like that with the, Argentina Zuma.
Yeah, the amazing Zuma, who I actually saw him do jobs on Goulas's TVs in the early 70s when he was on the way out of the business. The guy who had sold out Madison Square Garden in one brief shining moment of Rocka mania and fucking mass hypnosis was doing jobs on, Birmingham TV 12 years later. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Van Dam, unless you're that flexible and could do those things, everything he did was wrong. He shouldn't have landed from those heights on one fucking leg. Anybody else would have blown their ACLs. His shit was awkward. You didn't know which direction it was coming. But I don't know whether he was stiff or not. I never worked with him. I haven't had the discussion. But the shit looked good in a lot of cases. But sometimes it looked awkward. But it worked for him. The basics of actually wrestling, I never saw him use any. But because Van Dam, he didn't just pick that at random. He kind of looked like the younger Jean-Claude Van Damme, not the one that's been floating in a fucking river, but the younger one in the movies, and doing the martial arts shit and the spin kicks and everything. And the splash was incredible. Looked like you definitely knew it was there. But, he got over with it, and that's the example of, as we've talked about so many times, of people trying to imitate Mick Foley, but they only imitated. They weren't. It just doesn't work unless it really works for somebody. It doesn't work, And when people try to imitate those people that can only be unique in themselves, it's the shits. So yes, Van Dam, a very unique case. Not a classic, not even a good classic worker, but could do some outrageous shit because of his freaky fucking athleticism.
You know, in a lot of ways, Roddy Piper, I think of, in that he wasn't, a classic worker, but he had his own unique style, and it worked for him, and other people couldn't really do it. But with Roddy Piper, his way of working made perfect sense. Yeah,
and throwing those fast punches with that shoulder thing, and the way he would sell, he looked like he was in a fight, but then he'd kick it in, and as a heel when he'd back up, or as a babyface when he'd come back, it was perfect. It was exactly what any heel or babyface should do, except nobody else should do it like that because it would look goofy or it wouldn't work. But part of that is just your natural body language that you have and your natural charisma that you had. Because at Cincinnati Gardens one night, me and Weasel Dooley went up there. Piper was on the card, and that's the night that he was going down the aisle to the ring. And some guy fucking tackled him because Cincinnati, when Mid-Atlantic started, the people had grown up on the Sheik's territory, but they hadn't in large numbers seen, decent, violent wrestling in Cincinnati since the early 70s, right? And this was 1980, 81. So they're seeing the Mid-Atlantic, the Snookas and Pipers and Steamboats, and, they're going fucking crazy. And it was a hot crowd. And they could get hot, right? So Piper's on the way to the ring. And this guy fucking tackled him. And we're in like the fucking 12th row, was as close as we could get, and we're standing up on our chairs trying to see this guy tackle Piper, and Piper spun him around and took him down. And all you could see, remember when you would see Piper as a baby face get on top of a heel, making a comeback and throwing those fast punches right to left down on him? That's exactly what Piper was doing to this motherfucker. Within 10 seconds, he had easily punched him 15 times. And the cops pulled Piper off the fucking fan. Piper goes to the ring to have his match, and they picked the fan up by his feet and his arms and carried him back down the aisle. And he was his head was twitching. So that was, whether he was working or shooting, that's the way it looked like when Piper made his fucking comeback.
Well, we have time for a couple more questions here, Jim. This next one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Burke in Green River, Wyoming.
This is by the way, the first question we've ever had on the program from Green River, Wyoming.
I believe so. Who knows? Maybe Burke will be the next Charlie from Starkville and put Green River on the map. We'll find out with this question. Jim, I've often wondered if Vince McMahon ever considered firing Shawn instead of Bret in 1997. It might not have saved him as much money, but I think an argument could have been made that it would have been the better decision. By all accounts, Shawn was unreliable, irritable, unprofessional, and buried deep in addiction at this time. An argument for firing him could be easily made. Sure, he could have gone to WCW and joined the NWO with his buddies, but if history teaches us anything, it's that Eric Bischoff wouldn't have known what to do with him and would have squandered any momentum he brought. With Shawn gone, the WWF could have booked Austin to beat Bret at WrestleMania 14 in a rematch from their classic WrestleMania 13 match, and being able to look in hindsight, WWF would have had Austin, Bret, and Undertaker established with Triple H, Mick Foley, Triple H, listed here twice.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he would have taken up 2 spots.
Kurt Angle and The Rock yet to emerge. They would further have had Y2J and The Big Show coming along, and I think the roster might have been better. The fact we never got Bret versus Kurt Angle is one of the biggest missed matches of all time, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Well, yes, and as my mother used to say, if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass on the ground. If we'd have known all this stuff afterwards, because he even made the mention in the questions, as history has shown us, a lot of those things you didn't actually know then, and didn't know the Big Show was coming, didn't know Y2J, et cetera, et cetera. But I agree with you from a personal standpoint that I would have much rather seen Vince keep Bret and let Shawn go. But having said that, no, he never did consider it. He didn't fire either one of them. And in his mind, he didn't fire either one of them. He told Bret, I cannot honor this contract. See if you can get the deal that they offered you before, and we will part amicably. That in Vince's mind, he was not firing Bret. He would have not fired either one of them. And he didn't want to have to get rid of one of them. Vince got fixated, whether reasonably so or irrationally so, on the amount of Bret's contract when he got those bad financial reports and shit was going south that year. And he didn't know that he was a year away from a mega turnaround. That's one of those things you don't know until you bump your ass on the ground, right? So he would have kept both of them if he could, and the only reason he wanted to lose one was because of the burdensome amount of the contract. It's not like one of them had to go in Vince's mind. In their minds, one of them needed to go, and it was the other one, to whichever one was thinking it. So that's the way all that stuff had. Yes, it would have been wonderful if it had worked out the other way, but it didn't because of those reasons, and nobody knew some of those things were going to happen to begin with. And at the time, I had confidence that WCW couldn't last because I was seeing I was seeing not only the product, but you heard the stories of how they put the product together and how fucking bumblefucked and irrational a lot of the decisions were, or last minute or whatever. And I always had confidence over the long run that the WWF would beat them simply because it was a more professionally run organization, whether you liked the product or not. It wasn't and even if you couldn't say it wasn't a bunch of nuts running the WWF, at least they were a bunch of talented nuts at running a somewhat stable company. Instead of people getting fucking hot and cold depending on what day the wind was blowing, like WCW had and continued to do at that point for years. So, all of that stuff would have worked out great, but it wasn't going to happen that way.
It would have affected the development of the Mr. McMahon character, obviously, if Bret had stayed and Shawn had left. But I do think it would have been a stronger main event for WrestleMania 14. If you had Bret versus Austin, the big rematch, 1 year in the making with Mike Tyson as the referee. I don't know. I would like to see that.
And then we wouldn't have to worry on whether everybody was going to do business or not. Oh, and that's the weekend. Michaels was calling and complaining constantly in Boston that weekend. He wasn't going to come. Then he was going to come. Then he needed special security and a separate dressing area and and no brown M&Ms and just whatever the fuck that he could do to just fucking keep him on edge and make him think, what the fuck's going to happen with this guy?
Special security from who?
From anybody, just anything special, different, to be a pain in the ass. I'll do this, but I need that. I'll do this, but I need that. Well, I got to have this or whatever. And just planting doubt and harassment in all their minds.
Well, on a similar topic, another question has come in this week. Let me get this one. This is sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Spicy. How do you think Shawn Michaels would have fared in WCW if he had jumped during the Monday Night Wars? How do you think the WWF would have fared in his absence?
Well, same thing. I think the WWF would have fared fine, as they actually, did when he was absent a short time after that. I think he would have had some great matches in WCW against certain friends of his, and I think that overall they would have somehow bungled it, and he would have not been any bigger or even as big in WCW as he was in the WWF, because Vince was dedicated to taking care of Shawn, and as obvious when they bungled Bret Hart, you think they wouldn't have bungled Shawn Michaels? Even and yes, Nash and Hall were there to help out, but goddamn, wasn't Nash responsible for the worst booking during the height of the worst booking era? So they might have beat a lot of people, but somewhere or another it would have been fucked up, or they would have let Michaels fall victim to his own particular fucking problems and issues and fuck himself up, because they wouldn't have been keeping as close an eye on him.
Do you think if he had gone to WCW, his back injury would have healed up?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that would have felt a lot better with a lot of guaranteed millions of dollars.
Vince was paying him the whole time he was out with the back injury?
You are correct, sir. He paid Shawn until there was no WCW to go to. And then suddenly, Shawn's back felt better.
All right. Well, let's get another question here.
One more question. Then we have that important appointment that we're going to talk about here at the end of the program.
We've gotten a lot of questions about Owen Hart still coming in. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Daniel Martinez. After watching Owen's Dark Side of the Ring episode, do you think Vince McMahon has some type of guilt in him? Do you think he loses sleep over it? After seeing that he didn't even have the balls to tell Martha that Owen was dead, and then countersuing her, I think there's a dark side to him. Also, what went through your head when you saw Martha pulling out the small clip that only needed 6 pounds of pressure to release Owen?
Well, that first, I'd already seen it on, video when there was a story done about the situation back then. But and obviously, he was more cooperative than almost anybody should have been in that position to get hooked up in that thing to begin with, is all I'll say. And obviously the reasons why he was trying to be cooperative have been gone over. I don't think Vince loses any sleep over anything, except he told a magazine interviewer one time, he said, "I believe I will die a very, very frustrated man because there will be so much more that I want to do." The only reason Vince loses sleep is if he's up late at night working. And I'm sure he feels badly about the way that many things have happened, but I'm also sure that he has a way to reconcile them in his head that absolves him of any technical blame in the issue. So I don't think he's staying up late worrying about anything but his next business conquest.
Well, with that, we wrap up another episode of the Drive Thru. Of course, the Jim Cornette Experience debuts this Friday. We'll see how things go, but it may be a pretty big episode. You may want to check it out this week.
Well, no, let's just go ahead and say it. Special news bulletin. We are going to be speaking this Thursday, actually this Friday, on the Jim Cornette Experience to none other than the recently debuted FTR, about their journey through the WWE and now into the land of winkin', blinkin', and nod.
That's right. Everyone's always said they want to see FTR with Jim Cornette. Well, you're not going to see it, but you get to hear it.
But you can hear it.
That's right. This Friday on The Experience, of course, the Drive-Thru and Experience available wherever you find your favorite podcast or on YouTube. tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube to get full episodes, clips of episodes, and omnibus collections. Thank you so much to everyone subscribing. Over 131,000 subscribers right now. It is growing by leaps and bounds. The march to 1 million continues. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. If you want access to the archives of The Experience and the Drive-Thru going all the way back to 2013, new episodes uploaded each and every Sunday evening, become a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For $5 a month, you get access to unlimited. I shouldn't say unlimited, there's a limit. But you get access to tons and tons of Jim Cornette from the past. Hear Jim talk with Lance Storm, Missy Hyatt, Larry Matisick, and so many more. Steve Austin, the official Jim Cornette Patreon, patreon.com/Cornette. We also have a couple of watch-along videos up on there with more to come. We promise. We've been teasing it, but we've been so busy. There is more to come.
There's more to come.
That's right. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at @GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast, 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. Jim, I don't even know what I'm allowed to say or what I should say anymore about Cornette's Collectibles. Where are we now?
Act naturally, say nothing. We'll talk next week.
Okay, of course, the Drive-Thru brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Friday on The Experience, and next week right here on the Drive-Thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!